Okay, so we have our object here, our pommel made, or more or less defined. We've still got to do some work on it, but we don't have the handle going from that. So what do I do there? What we're going to do is go to 3 again. 3 is being the border, and we're going to click. And the only place that has an open border on the sphere is that top hole, because everything else is closed, meaning that everything else has a polygon next to it that's closed to another polygon. So I'm going to select that border right there, go to the front mode, and then use my move tool, hold shift and move upward. Now I'm going to move upward. I can keep going all the way up, and we will in a second, but I want to stop right here. I want to stop at this first edge, and I'll explain that in a minute. But after I do that first edge, I'm not doing anything else, and then I'm going to shift and drag all the way up to the top to where it looks like it hits the edge of the guard. So that's it. That's all I've done so far. Let's go back to this mode here. And I basically made this one object right out of itself. It's simple, it's easy, it's beautiful. So we're going to go back to front, and we're going to come to here, and we're going to do some more work on our handle. So what we need to do is get out of border mode and go straight to our edge mode. We're going to grab all these edges. When we grab all these edges, we now know, well, we could do it a couple ways. I can just grab a box around them, or I could click just to prove the point and go to ring, and it'll ring all the way around them. And that's because, like what we talked about before, these are what are called loops, meaning that they're parallel lines all the way around the whole object, and that means they work the way they're supposed to. Okay, so we have that. We go to front, and again back to front, and we have those selected, and now we can come back in and do our connect thing, and we'll do our connect up here this time. Again, I'll try and do it different a lot of times, but if we push this connect settings button, it pops up, and look at that, it almost perfectly cut that right in half. Okay, well, that's almost right in half, but it's not right in half. So what's the deal? These are pretty well evenly spaced out. So the first thing I probably want to do is mess with this cut, the first cut it put in, and tell it that I want it centered on this. Because eventually what's going to happen is, here, let me show you. I'm going to do 3 of them. Look at, they all 3 cut right inside of there. Okay, so first thing I'm going to just do to make it really simple is move this into the right position. We have these 2 things. This moves the edges further away from each other if there's more than one. So if I do 2, for example, it makes them further and closer. Okay, so I can control that. This one, on the other hand, let me change this back to 1. This one just moves the positions of all of them. If there's more than one, it'll move the positions of all of them. We only want 1 right now, so we're going to move this position up to here, because this is going to be the starting point. This is where, you know, I'm telling the center of this is, and it's not perfect, but 1 looks about right, -1 for mine. So now I'm going to go back up to 3 and see what I get. And these are not quite in the right position either, so I'm going to use this first one that we talked about and move them outward a little bit from the center, just like that. Now all 3 of these edges are centered on this object. Perfect, right? Okay, so bam. Why is that perfect? Well, when I start doing stuff to this handle, I want to make sure that those segments are exactly where I want them, or exactly like the concept, or where I want them, really close. And if I look at this one now, and I just double click to go all the way around the edge, and I click here, and I drag it down just a little bit, that looks perfect to me. So the next thing I want to do is I want to pay attention to these curves, and just like that sword, the curve is going to be done with a chamfer. But before I even do that, I need to look at something else. These are the center of the bands that go around them, but not the center of these. So what I need to do is segment these out a little bit more. So I'm going to double click them again, all 3 of them, like that. Just double click on them with holding control. So I grab one, double click, grab the other, double click, grab the other, double click. So I've got all 3 of them done. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to chamfer this time. Or we could come up here to chamfer. We're going to use the chamfer settings option here. So we get that. I'm not going to change anything, but first I'm going to change this number up here at the top here, and I'm going to do that. And you can see what it's doing. It's dividing those two objects out to the edges. Now, right now, I don't want a center cut. I probably won't. So I'm going to go ahead and change this 1 to 0. So now I've just subdivided these areas super easy, super fast, and super efficient. And that's the reason we did that one here at the bottom, because it's not quite the same size or scale, so it would have been easier to just do it right from the get-go. Or I could cut it later, but then I would have, this would have been off a little bit. So I just did it in the beginning, thinking ahead, and then we'll say, okay. So now I've got those set up. We'll get to the next part of how we get those looking like they're pushed out in a minute. But we're going to grab, in this point, we're going to grab all 4 of these beveled, rounded interior faces first. So we've done this before, but we're going to go ahead back to connect. And this time we don't want 3. We just want 1, and we want it to be centered because hopefully they're all centered. So this needs to be 0, and bam. Okay, so 3 of them, or all 4 of them are centered inside the center of the curve, more or less, I think so, yeah. So we'll say okay. Now, I need to come in here and go to scale move, scale position, I mean. I'm going to scale with all 3 of these selected the exact same. I don't need to go up or down because there's really no, they're only compared to themselves. So when I do this uniform scale across the surface and making sure this is on uniform, if I do this and go in, it actually gives me that rough idea. Now I'm going a little bit further, and I'll show you why right now, but we probably want to go even further than that. I'm going to go in a little further. And notice how these don't match up. It's just an imperfection in the way the concept was done. We could move the concept over, I guess, if we really want to. Let's do that so it doesn't itch our brain. So I'm going to unfree. Now I'm not. I'm just going to leave it and say it's not perfect, so you guys get used to the idea of things not always having to be perfect. So concepts or guides, not the layout, unless you get a tech concept. So if I right click and I come back to chamfer again, just like we did with these, but on these angular lines, it's going to keep, by the way, what I just had it set to. You'll notice that it says 0 and 3. We're going to go ahead and move this up a bit, okay? And then we're going to add more edges, kind of like we did with the sword, right? And notice this, when I do that, let me pull back out here. It divides this one, but nothing is happening between here. So if I go up 1, you'll see now it's divided here, but this is exactly the same. So as you do this, you want to distribute these edges closer to the outside. So after you get 3 in there, or whatever number you come up with, you want to come in here and just try and pull this out as far as you can. And you'll see now they're getting more evenly distributed. Maybe not if I want to pull it back so they're perfectly evenly distributed. That's what I want to do. So the point is that once you subdivide it more, it's only dividing between the one edge that it used to create it. So here, I'll drop this down again and show you what I mean. So now it's dividing right here. Remember, this is the original edge line. We just can't see it. If I go down 1 more, that's the original one. It's just taken this first one and adding 2 more edges to it. And this is, if I didn't do that, then we wouldn't have any roundedness. So if I go back up to 3, I've got a really nice curve on my sword handle, and I can say done. I mean, honestly, super fast. If we take the wireframe off and make it this, we've got our handle pretty well blocked out. Now, the only things we don't have is the extruded edges, and we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to go back in here and turn on my wireframe and go back to, this time we're going to go to 4. They changed the shortcuts for this for selecting a loop. So if I hold Control and then click the first one, and then, just click the first one, hold Control, and then click on the next one to it, it'll go in the line. So, and then if I do that down here, I'm still holding Control, so it's holding the other ones, and I do this, it'll do it again. The other way to do it is just to grab that. Remember, we're just grabbing inside the box, so we'll do this last one where we just talked about. Control and double click. Okay, so I've got all 3 of those done. I'm not going to worry about this one because it's a bevel out enough. We can push it out more if we want in a few minutes. But what we've done is we've selected all those rims, and if you remember what they look like, they're a little bit extruded out to give them a little bit more indexing for the hand. So we're going to use a tool called Extrude. And what Extrude does is it takes all the faces that you have and exports them outward, or pushes them outward while building a solid base behind it. There's a couple of ways to do it. Actually, it's funny enough, the newest way to do it is just scale and do this. So we'll just do that because it's the fastest, but there's also, if you ever wanted to, an extrude modifier. The extrude modifier has some other things that you have to learn about it, so we'll just do it the simple way. We're going to go to front, we have those selected, make sure we're on uniform scale, okay, and if this changes, you'll know when it starts doing stuff, but what you have to realize, if I push the scale button and I'm already on scale, it'll change what kind of scale it is. See, this says select a non-uniform scale. If I push scale or R again, it'll make it select a non-uniform, like squash and stretch. So there's only 3 options, and if you click down, you can see them. So if you're on the wrong one, you just click it 1 or 2 times and you'll get back to the base, or you can do the drop down. So it's R, again, R for the shortcut for scale. Okay, so I have this set, and now if I hold Shift and I scale outward by dragging upward in this case, I get this pulling out, just like that. See that? Now I've got these, and these may be too far, and that's okay. If I don't hold Shift now I'm just going to adjust them a little bit. Okay. The other thing that I want to try and do with these is what's called bevel them in. So I'm going to do it this way and see if this works. Oh, cool. Okay. So what I've done is I told that extrusion to then bevel inward a little bit. Now I want to keep it feeling like it's, so I'm going to adjust it a little bit more and maybe bevel it out a little bit less. I want it to feel like there's a rib there, but not a heavy, rib at this point. And we'll come back and actually soften that up and stuff in a minute, in a few. But now I've got that set up and I can do that there. There's other ways, like I said, there's a bevel and an extrude option in there, but they've made it easier this round, so we just hold Shift and we can scale it outwards. Okay, so look at this. Now I've got my handle more or less laid out like this. Obviously the smoothing groups need to be addressed, but we're going to finish the whole thing before we do that. Like I've told you, if you do it before, you're going to be in trouble.